Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. This time, somewhat on time. Still late, but you know. Anyway, this is for this week's color throwdown challenge, which was gray, black, yellow, and white. So I will have a link to the challenge in my blog post, which will be linked directly below the video if you are interested. To make my card, I started with this Trinity Stamps Slimline Doodle Garden stamp set. This is from their last release. I think it was last month. I'm not even sure. Anyway, I have Reinker watercolor paper in my MISTI and then this big stamp. And I used my anti-static powder tool and then I inked up the stamp with clear embossing ink. And I'm stamping it a couple times because it is a large image. There's a ton of detail in this. And I wanted to make sure I got it all stamped. And then once it's stamped, I'm going to cover this with detail white embossing powder. So get that all coated, tap off the excess, and then I'm going to melt all of it with my heat tool. So bring my heat tool to it, melt everything until it's smooth and melted. And then I like to, regardless of whether it's white on white, but especially when it's white on white, because it is hard to see, I tilt it back and forth in the light to make sure everything's glossy and there's no dull grainy areas. If there are dull grainy areas, that's where you want to make sure to get those with the heat tool to melt everything. So once I did that, I then watercolored everything and I kept it simple. Since I was following the color throwdown challenge, I stuck with just yellow for all the blooms. I used the Mustard Seed Distress Ink Reinker. I did this on my last video and I go on those phases where then I like do the same thing more than once. So I put just a drop in my little palette here and I just used that for everything. So I used it for the flower centers and then for some of the petals, there's like little tulips in here too. And I was just holding, I didn't bother taping this down or anything. Because I'm not using like a lot of water, that sort of thing. And then I'm just kind of tilting it so I can see the heat embossing. And as always, in video, it's hard to see. So it kind of looks, even near the end, you don't really see it. But in real life, you can see the heat embossing. So you see all that detail and the shine from it and it's not lost. But anywho, I did the yellow and then of course I had to add a bit of green because there's stems and leaves and that sort of a thing. And I wanted those little pops of green. It just, this for the most part, I guess I wouldn't call this clean and simple, but I wanted that, you know, little bit. So I used a drop of Rustic Wilderness Distress Ink. And again, as always, like it's funny, as I was editing this, hindsight's always 20/20. I have those little Reinker Distress Ink palettes, if you know what I'm talking about. They're plastic with a bunch of wells and a lid. I should have been using that instead of my little porcelain palette because if you're using like distress inks to watercolor with like this, you can put them in that palette, put the lid on it, and it doesn't matter if it, like, I'm using air quotes that you can't see but dries out because you can keep re-wetting it, keep reusing it over and over again. Even in a palette like this, you totally can. It's just I'll run out of space very quickly. But like one little drop does a ton, as you can see here. Like I could do this over and over and over again and not ever have to get any more drops because it's concentrated color. So anywho, I used Rustic Wilderness for the greenery. I used Weathered Wood, very watered down, for the petals that were white, just to give it that little bit of variation so it wasn't completely boring. And then I mixed Rusty Hinge with a bit of Rustic Wilderness for the sunflower centers. And then, of course, I did some splatter. It was all dry at this point. I still had some white gouache and some Perfect Pearl powder in my palette from before. That I don't like clean out because I'll just keep reusing it until it's done for. So I added my splatter. And then again, when everything was dry, I die cut that with one of the modern embossed frame panels from Trinity. And I like these ones because they die cut and they also emboss a little frame all around the perimeter. You can kind of see it, I think, better, I hope anyway, in the photo at the end of the video, but it gives it that little extra something. Love it. So I did that. And then for my main sentiment, I was just using the SCRIPTY Happy Birthday or SCRIPTY Birthday Greetings wafer die set. And I die cut that from black cardstock. I die cut 3 sets so that I can stack 3 layers together, because I really like the dimension that gives. So I just use little dabs of craft tacky glue and then just adhere all of those layers together. There is an outline for these dies as well, so you can have like the word in the outline and don't have to stack them if you don't want to. But I use just the words. And then for my card base, I use more black cardstock, and I cut it to 7 inches by 8.5. And then I'm scoring it at 3.5. So this will be a 3.5 inch by 8.5 inch slimline card. And then I had also cut down some very light gray cardstock. This is Lawn Fawn's Fog. Yeah, Lawn Fawn's Fog cardstock that I had cut down to just slightly bigger than my little flower panel, just to bring in a little bit more of that gray. So I used that. And then I needed to line up these words. Generally over the years, I've been, you know, so amazing with, with eyeballing things. But I've mentioned this as I get older. And also I now have astigmatism in both eyes. So as I'm getting older, I'm finding that I am not good at eyeballing things at all. So I need ways to, you know, make things straight, etc. And this little T-square ruler is just, it's one of those must-haves in your craft room. It just comes in handy. It's cheap too. It's only a few bucks. I bought this years and years ago. I'll have a link to it as well. Yeah. Any sort of clear ruler works, but the T-square is just nice because it has that little edge, so you can butt it up against things and get things straight. So that's what I use to help me get these adhered straight across this card so they're not looking all wonky. Sometimes wonky is great. It just depends. But with that, I wanted to make sure, you know, the wording was on the same level. So I got those adhered. And then, of course, I have to do something for the inside of the card. So I grabbed some more white cardstock. And I still have the image in my MISTI. And I put a piece of just scrap copy paper on top of it. And I inked up the stamp with weathered wood oxide ink. And this first stamping is on the copy paper because I didn't want it to be this dark and intense on the inside because I want to easily be able to write over it with like a ballpoint pen, etc. So without re-inking the stamp, I removed the copy paper and then stamped this. So I got the 2nd generation inking on this white cardstock. So it's just much lighter. And then again, during editing, I was like, oh, this would have looked really nice if I'd stamped it in the weathered wood on the watercolor paper and then clear heat embossed it and then watercolored it. It would have looked really nice. Someone else can do that though. There's the idea. Because I can't go back and redo all this. Anywho, I wasn't going to add splatter to the inside, but I somehow managed to get a couple little yellow smears on this. I die cut it with the same modern embossed wafer die, and then in somewhere in between there, I got like yellow smears on it. And again, I wasn't going to restamp it, so I was like, splatter to the rescue, like I've told you guys. Add some splatter, add some, you know, strategically placed bling, depending on, you know, the oops or another layer, whatever. You know, just cover it up. Nobody's going to know. So that's what I did. And then I pulled out some of these little clay embellishments. I have stacks of them from Trinity stamps. I don't use them very often, but when I was doing this, I was like, oh, I remember I've got some little like floral ones. So I know for sure the Sunny Seeds ones are available. Those are the ones on the right that look like almost like little sunflowers. Really. They're really cute. So I adhered those randomly kind of all over. I thought it would be just kind of cute having them peek out with all the little flowers. And then I had some other ones with little happy faces on them that I adhered. And then I also adhered some black licorice jelly hearts that I've already used up like half a container of these because I love them. So I adhered those. I also made an envelope to match using my Trinity Stamps Slimline envelope builder wafer die set that I bought. This is what started my like love affair with Trinity Stamps, was this wafer die set that I bought however long ago, and I've done a bunch of videos showing how to assemble these envelopes. So I super sped through this process because it's pretty basic. You can use double-sided tape. You don't have to use liquid glue. I'm just comfortable with liquid glue. You just got to make sure you're not using too much because you don't want it oozing out. You don't want to, you know, glue everything together, you know, sealing the entire envelope shut. And I forgot to adhere this flap before adhering the long ones together, but I just tucked it in and was able to get it, you know, salvage the things. As with everything, my brain's going one way and my hands are going the other, and you know. So I adhered my envelope, and I had a little bit of the pattern paper left over. This was just some Doodlebug 12 by 12, you know, from my massive hoarded stash. So I die cut the pieces for the envelope, and then I used the remaining little bit, cut it in a little strip, and added it to the inside of the card just to give it that little matchiness. And here you can kind of see the gloss of the embossing, you know, so you can actually see the detail of the stamp. But yeah, that was my card for today. As always, I will have a link, like I said, below to my blog post. I'll have a link to the color challenge in the post. I'll have a link, picture links to all the supplies used, all that info. You can check it out in the description box below the video. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, subscribing, thumbs upping, commenting, all of it. I very much appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!